Ryan never expected to wake up to a crime scene in his own front yard. But there it was, petals ripped apart, stems broken, and freshly planted daisies trampled into the gravel. The once pristine flower bed he'd lovingly nurtured throughout spring lay in ruins. At first, he assumed it was a stray dog or the errant wind, but the deliberate destruction was unmistakable. Someone had intentionally stomped on every delicate bloom. As Ryan stepped outside, the sight left him both heartbroken and furious. His garden, his personal sanctuary where he expressed his creativity and love for nature, had been violated. The culprit? None other than Karen, the self-appointed enforcer of Cedar Springs' overly strict HOA rules. Known for her habit of policing every green detail in the neighborhood, Karen had a long history of complaining about unauthorized flower displays that didn't conform to the community's bland aesthetic. But this was different. This was an act of calculated vandalism meant to punish him for daring to be different. Ryan's mind raced as he surveyed the devastation. Determined not to let Karen's petty tyranny go unchallenged, he recalled the one thing his neighbors rarely talked about: his impressive cactus wall. Over the years, Ryan had built an imposing barrier along the edge of his property, a living wall of spiky, resilient cacti that not only protected his garden from unwelcome intruders, but also served as a bold statement of natural beauty and defiance. With the remnants of his once beautiful flower bed smoldering under the early morning sun, Ryan's resolve hardened. Karen's actions had crossed the line, and it was time to send a message. That very morning, with a mix of determination and creative fire in his heart, Ryan decided that Karen's flower stomping days were over. Today, his cactus wall would not just be a passive barrier. It would become a living, breathing symbol of retribution. He envisioned a plan where the very sight of his prickly, untamed cacti would serve as a constant reminder that nature and the homeowner would not tolerate mindless destruction. As the light grew stronger, Ryan resolved to mobilize his resources, document the evidence meticulously, and prepare to confront the HOA board with undeniable proof that Karen's overreach had gone too far. This was not just about vandalism. It was about the right to nurture one's own space and to express individuality through vibrant, living art. And as the day began, Ryan knew that today, Karen would finally face the consequences of her actions. Cedar Springs was the kind of neighborhood that prided itself on order, conformity, and a meticulously manicured landscape. Nestled within a gated community, every yard was a testament to uniformity. Perfectly trimmed lawns, carefully planted trees, and a relentless adherence to the HOA's strict guidelines. In this environment, personal expression was often subdued in favor of a homogenized aesthetic. It was a place where the smallest deviation from the norm was met with swift intervention. At the center of this rigid system was Karen Miller, known to everyone as HOA Karen. In her mid-50s, Karen was a force of nature herself, always dressed in conservative outfits. Armed with a clipboard and an ever-alert smartphone, she patrolled Cedar Springs with an intensity that left no detail unexamined. Karen believed that every flower, every decorative planter, and every burst of color in the neighborhood had to adhere to a pre-approved, bland standard. To her, the uniqueness of individual gardens was a threat to the community's image, and she was relentless in her pursuit of perfection, often issuing fines and complaints at the slightest hint of nonconformity. In stark contrast stood Ryan, a longtime resident and proud cultivator of creativity. Ryan's property was a breath of fresh air amid the sea of uniformity. He had transformed his front yard into a vibrant garden bursting with life, an explosion of colors, textures, and scents that told the story of his passion for nature. From heirloom tomatoes and fragrant lavender to a carefully curated display of seasonal flowers, every element of his garden was a work of art, nurtured with love and an unyielding commitment to beauty. But Ryan wasn't content to simply create. He was also a man of resilience and resourcefulness. Beyond his flourishing flower beds, he had built a distinctive cactus wall along the property line, a living barrier that combined rugged beauty with an air of defiance. These cacti, with their spiky silhouettes and hardy nature, symbolized the very essence of Ryan's character: untamed, independent, and unyielding. They were a constant reminder that nature, in all its wild glory, could thrive even in the face of suppression. While many of Ryan's neighbors quietly accepted the HOA's restrictions, a growing number began to whisper about the man who dared to express himself freely. His garden was both admired and envied, a beacon of individuality in a place where conformity reigned supreme. Yet, Karen saw this vibrant display not as a celebration of nature, but as an affront to the community's bland uniformity. Every time Ryan unveiled a new arrangement or a splash of unexpected color, Karen was quick to issue a complaint, threatening fines and demanding immediate conformity. The tension between Karen's vision and Ryan's creative spirit had been simmering for months. But nothing could have prepared him for the day when Karen took her vendetta to a new level by stomping on his cherished flower bed. It was a deliberate, destructive act, one that not only destroyed his hard work, but also symbolized the oppressive force of the HOA over individual expression. In that moment, Ryan knew he had reached his breaking point. His garden, his passion, and his right to be different were under direct attack. And as he surveyed the wreckage of petals and broken stems, he resolved that Karen's flower stomping days were over. In the wake of the discovery, Ryan immediately began gathering evidence. He combed through security camera footage, documenting every act of vandalism, every shattered blossom, every broken stem. The footage left no doubt. Someone had deliberately trampled his garden, and all signs pointed to HOA Karen. The digital timestamps were irrefutable. Karen had been seen lurking near his property in the dead of night, her intentions as clear as the destruction that greeted him each morning. The community, already divided between those who quietly abided by the HOA's rigid rules and those who craved freedom of expression, was soon abuzz with whispers of outrage. Neighbors posted messages on the local forum, sharing their own grievances about arbitrary fines and invasive inspections. "It's not just about the garden. It's about our right to be creative," one message read. The support for Ryan was palpable, and as more residents came forward with similar stories, the movement against Karen's overreach began to take shape. Determined not to be silenced by unjust fines, Ryan resolved to take matters into his own hands. He knew that if Karen wanted to suppress his creativity, then he would turn the tables in the most dramatic fashion possible. The answer lay in his prized cactus wall, a living, resilient barrier he had built over the years. These cacti were more than mere plants. They were a symbol of his defiance and the wild spirit that refused to be tamed by bureaucratic rules. Ryan spent days planning the ultimate counterstrike. With a careful blend of artistry and strategy, he envisioned transforming his cactus wall into a towering monument, a 20-foot structure of prickly defiance that would loom over Karen's property. The idea was simple. While Karen sought to impose order and conformity, Ryan would celebrate the untamed beauty of nature, letting his cactus wall serve as both a protective barrier and a bold statement of resistance. He began by selecting the sturdiest, most imposing cacti from his collection. Over several long, determined hours, he rearranged and reinforced his cactus wall, designing it in such a way that it formed an almost impenetrable fortification along the edge of his property. Every cactus was carefully positioned to create a natural barrier, their spines interlocking in a display of rugged unity. The project wasn't just about defense, it was about making a statement. Ryan intended the wall to be a constant reminder that creativity and individuality could not be trampled by petty enforcers. At the same time, Ryan made sure to document every step of the transformation. He recorded time-lapse videos of the wall taking shape, snapped countless photos, and even prepared a detailed post for the community forum outlining his plan and the principles behind it. His message was clear: "My garden is my sanctuary, and no one, especially not someone who issues arbitrary fines, can take that away from me." As word of the cactus wall spread, the digital momentum grew. Neighbors rallied behind Ryan, sharing the images of the towering, spiky barrier and chanting supportive hashtags like #CactusRevolt and #FlowerFreedom. The community was beginning to see the cactus wall not just as a defensive structure, but as a symbol of resistance, a living monument to the right to express oneself without interference. Meanwhile, Karen's response was swift and predictable. Furious at the bold defiance, she posted stern messages demanding that Ryan remove the wall immediately, accusing him of vandalism and disrupting community harmony. But her complaints only fueled the fire. The more she tried to suppress his creativity, the more Ryan's cactus wall grew into a rallying point for all who believed that individuality should be celebrated. The conflict was now unmistakable, a direct clash between the authoritarian enforcement of the HOA and the unyielding spirit of personal creativity. Ryan's garden had become a battleground, a place where the right to live and express oneself was being contested in the most visceral way possible. Every shattered petal and every broken stem from his destroyed flower bed served as a reminder of what was at stake. Determined to protect his sanctuary, Ryan prepared for the next phase of the battle. He knew that his cactus wall was just the beginning, a powerful symbol, yes, but also a precursor to the greater stand he was ready to take. As the digital evidence mounted and the community's support swelled, Ryan vowed that Karen's attempts to enforce conformity would be met with unrelenting resistance. The stage was set for a dramatic showdown, a moment when the entire community would have to choose between the sterile uniformity of imposed rules and the vibrant, untamed beauty of creative freedom. In the days that followed, the story of Ryan's defiant cactus wall spread like wildfire throughout Cedar Creek. Social media exploded with images and videos of the spiky monument, a bold declaration that resonated with every resident who had ever felt stifled by arbitrary HOA rules. Hashtags such as #CactusRevolt, #FlowerFreedom, and #StandForArt trended locally, igniting heated discussions about the right to express individuality and the importance of protecting creative spaces. Local news outlets quickly caught wind of the controversy. Reporters arrived in Cedar Creek, capturing interviews with shocked neighbors and filming the towering cactus wall that now guarded Ryan's property. "It's extraordinary," one anchor remarked on live television, "to see a man transform his own garden into a living statement against oppressive rule enforcement." The narrative shifted rapidly from a local dispute to a symbol of resistance against an overbearing bureaucracy. Interviews with residents revealed a mix of admiration and outrage. Many praised Ryan's audacity and ingenuity, while others worried about the potential consequences of such blatant defiance. Within the HOA board, tensions escalated behind closed doors. Emergency meetings were convened, and leaked minutes revealed a growing rift among board members. Some longtime members, who had once staunchly supported Karen's strict adherence to rules, began to question whether such oppressive measures were truly in the best interests of Cedar Creek. "We are supposed to foster a community, not stifle creativity," one board member was overheard saying in a heated discussion. Others, however, argued that maintaining order was paramount, regardless of the cost. The internal conflict threatened to tear the board apart, as digital petitions and social media outcry increasingly made it clear that the residents were no longer willing to tolerate Karen's personal vendettas. Ryan continued to update his online community with live footage of the cactus wall and detailed posts explaining the philosophy behind his rebellion. He shared behind-the-scenes videos of his work, showing how each cactus was carefully placed to form an impenetrable barrier, a living embodiment of the right to live freely without fear of arbitrary fines. His message was simple: "My garden is my sanctuary, and no one can trample on my right to express who I am." Every post was met with enthusiastic support. Comments poured in from across Cedar Creek. "Finally, someone standing up for creativity, and Karen can't control our lives." The digital support was overwhelming, and Ryan's actions quickly became the rallying cry for a broader movement against the HOA's oppressive practices. Karen's response was swift and desperate. In a series of frantic social media updates, she demanded that Ryan remove the cactus wall immediately and threatened further fines if he did not comply. Her attempts to downplay the incident as a misunderstanding were met with ridicule and counter-evidence from the community. Every time she posted a plea or a warning, residents responded with screenshots of the wall and hashtags like #NoMoreKaren and #Arwins. The digital narrative painted a clear picture: a man defending his property and his right to creative expression against an overzealous enforcer determined to impose her outdated vision. As the controversy reached a fever pitch, the HOA board announced that a final public hearing would be held to address the incident and determine the future of property rights enforcement in Cedar Creek. The news sent shockwaves through the community. In the days leading up to the hearing, neighborhood forums buzzed with heated debates, and local influencers championed the cause of creative freedom. Petitions demanding reform of the HOA's policies amassed thousands of signatures, and every shared image of Ryan's cactus wall became a symbol of resistance against bureaucratic tyranny. On the morning of the final hearing, the atmosphere was electric. Residents gathered outside the Cedar Creek Community Center, holding signs proclaiming "Our garden, our rights, and creativity cannot be fined." The energy was palpable, a mixture of hope, defiance, and the unwavering belief that personal freedom should never be suppressed by petty rules. Ryan arrived at the center, his digital dossier of evidence in hand, ready to confront the board and demand justice. Every shared video clip, every hashtag, and every comment online reinforced one undeniable truth: if the HOA board did not act, the legacy of Karen's arbitrary fines would continue to haunt Cedar Creek. The stage was set for a dramatic showdown, a moment that would force the entire community to re-examine the balance between order and individual expression, and to decide once and for all whether creative freedom would be allowed to flourish. The decisive moment came on a cool, brisk morning at the Cedar Creek Community Center. The boardroom was packed with HOA officials, local law enforcement representatives, community leaders, and a sea of resolute residents, all gathered for the final public hearing that would determine the fate of our community's enforcement policies. With a calm yet unwavering presence, Councilwoman Emily Roberts stepped up to the podium, her eyes reflecting the hope and determination of a community that had long been under siege by arbitrary rules. After a thorough review of all digital evidence, including time-stamped security footage, detailed logs of complaints, and the impassioned testimonies of our residents, we have reached an inescapable conclusion. Councilwoman Roberts began, her voice steady and authoritative. It is abundantly clear that the actions taken by Mrs. Karen Miller, specifically her repeated fines and her blatant attempts to suppress creative expression by banning a legitimate farm stand, were driven by personal bias and a gross abuse of power. Our community's right to express itself, to innovate, and to enjoy the beauty of nature on one's own terms is not negotiable. A heavy silence fell over the room as Roberts continued. Effective immediately, the HOA board will rescind all fines and sanctions related to this incident, and we will initiate a comprehensive review of our enforcement policies to ensure that personal vendettas can no longer dictate the lives of our residents. Today's decision is not merely about one man's farm stand or a cactus wall. It is a resounding declaration that Cedar Creek will stand for justice, creativity, and the inalienable right to live freely. Her words resonated powerfully, and murmurs of approval swept through the assembly. At that moment, a longtime community advocate, renowned for his steadfast commitment to individual rights, rose to speak. "Today, we stand united," he declared, his voice ringing with passion. "No resident should be forced to conform to an outdated, oppressive system that values uniformity over individuality. Let this vote be the turning point, a clear signal that our community will no longer tolerate the abuse of power by any enforcer, no matter how self-righteous. We demand accountability, and we will ensure that every violation of our rights is met with swift, decisive action." His declaration was met with thunderous applause, uniting the room in a collective call for reform. Following his address, a senior officer from the local oversight committee presented the final dossier, a meticulously compiled record of all digital evidence, expert testimonies, and official reports confirming the legality of Ryan's property modifications and the unjust nature of the fines imposed by Karen Miller. The evidence was irrefutable. Ryan's actions were a lawful exercise of his property rights, and every fine issued against him was a misuse of power. The internal review panel unanimously endorsed strict disciplinary measures against any abuse of authority, and the full report was scheduled for immediate public release. Councilwoman Roberts concluded, "Let this resolution mark the dawn of a new era for Cedar Creek, a community where every resident's rights are respected, where public authority is exercised with integrity, and where creative expression is celebrated rather than suppressed." Our vote today is a resounding declaration that we will protect our freedoms and that no one, no matter how zealous, can impose their will upon our community without accountability. Together, we stand for justice, transparency, and the right to live and express ourselves freely. Her final words, delivered with unwavering conviction, sealed the turning point in our battle for property rights and creative freedom. In that defining moment, as every face in the boardroom shone with determination and hope, the balance of power shifted irrevocably. The overwhelming digital evidence and the unified voice of the community forced the HOA board to take decisive action, a turning point that would forever reshape the governance of Cedar Creek. The days of petty, arbitrary fines and personal vendettas were over, and a future built on respect for individual rights and creative freedom was finally within our grasp. In the weeks that followed the historic vote, Cedar Creek underwent a profound transformation. News of the rescinded fines and sweeping reforms implemented by the HOA board spread rapidly throughout local media and social networks, igniting fervent debates about property rights, artistic freedom, and community governance. Editorials in the local newspaper, with headlines such as "A New Dawn for Cedar Creek" and "Community United for Creative Freedom," celebrated the decisive actions taken to protect every resident's right to express themselves without fear of punitive measures. Hashtags like #PropertyRights, #NoMoreHoBullying, and #ArtIsFreedom trended widely, reinforcing our collective determination to stand up against arbitrary rule enforcement. Town hall meetings and community forums saw record attendance as residents gathered to share their own experiences and to envision a future where local creativity and individual expression were not only tolerated but celebrated. Neighbors who had long lived under the oppressive grip of the HOA's stringent regulations now spoke proudly about their right to manage their own property and to showcase their individuality. "Our land is our legacy," one impassioned resident declared at a bustling meeting, "and we must protect it at all costs." The atmosphere was charged with hope, a promise that Cedar Creek would always honor the spirit of creativity and freedom. Within the reformed HOA board and local public safety departments, swift changes were implemented. Senior officials, led by Director James Carter and Lieutenant Marcus Reed, launched comprehensive training programs on ethical conduct, cultural sensitivity, and a responsible management of community resources. Regular internal audits and transparent disciplinary procedures were established to ensure that every complaint was meticulously scrutinized and that no resident would ever again be subjected to arbitrary fines or intrusive enforcement. Our duty is to protect the rights and dignity of every member of our community, Lieutenant Reed affirmed at a follow-up press conference, reinforcing our renewed commitment to justice and integrity. Community leaders and local civil rights organizations also mobilized, organizing workshops, public forums, and educational campaigns that empowered residents to stand up for their rights and to challenge outdated systems. When we stand together, our voices are powerful enough to transform our community, a local activist proclaimed at a town hall meeting, inspiring neighbors to unite in the fight for a more inclusive and equitable governance model. For me, the journey from confrontation to resolution was both deeply personal and profoundly transformative. My decision to retaliate against Karen's oppressive fines by building a towering cactus wall and unleashing my creative defiance had not only reclaimed my property rights, but had also sparked a movement that resonated far beyond my own farm stand. Neighbors, once silenced by fear of retribution, found their voices and shared their own stories of resistance, uniting in a common cause. The digital evidence that exposed Karen's overreach became a beacon of hope and a rallying cry for every resident who believed that artistic freedom and individual expression were fundamental rights. Karen Miller, once the formidable enforcer of the HOA's draconian policies, was now reduced to a cautionary tale, a vivid reminder that no one is above accountability when a community unites for justice. Her influence waned rapidly as records of her past transgressions circulated widely, underscoring the necessity of reform and the dangers of unchecked authority. At a final celebratory event held in the Central Park of Cedar Creek, residents, local officials, and community advocates gathered under the soft glow of the setting sun. A large banner reading, "Unity, Freedom, and Creative Expression," was unfurled between towering oaks, and heartfelt speeches resonated with promises of a brighter, more inclusive future. Today, we celebrate the victory of our rights over arbitrary interference, a victory for every homeowner and every creative spirit in our community, Councilwoman Roberts proclaimed, her voice filled with unwavering determination. The standing ovation that followed was a powerful affirmation of our collective commitment to protect our freedoms and to ensure that creativity remains a cherished value in Cedar Creek. As each new day dawned over Cedar Creek, the legacy of that fateful confrontation endured as a beacon of transformative change. The story of how Karen's flower stomping and arbitrary fines were met with a bold, defiant cactus wall, and how that act of creative rebellion galvanized an entire community, became a rallying cry for every resident who believed in the sanctity of private property and the right to live and express oneself freely. Every sunrise now carried with it the promise that in Cedar Creek, truth, justice, and creative freedom would forever prevail. In the end, what began as a personal battle evolved into a watershed moment for our entire community. We emerged more united, more vigilant, and more determined to safeguard our rights against any form of bureaucratic overreach. And as the sun rose each morning over our reclaimed neighborhood, it carried with it the promise that Cedar Creek would forever be a place where individuality, creativity, and respect for personal property were celebrated above all else.